good morning, noon, or night, whatever the fuck you're listening to this, you're tuning into It Came From Tubi, the show where I, your host as always, Jack, get on the free streaming service Tubi, and I don't know, pick out a couple of good movies, try to suggest them to you. Maybe all of us could get in together and watch them like a big family seated on a couch. You know, I don't have a family of my own. But you can be a part of that family by supporting me on Patreon for as little as $1 a month. That's right. And hey, what the fuck else can you buy for $1 in America? Not a hell of a lot. Gas is $3.58 in my fucking area. So please, if you enjoy literally anything I do, throw me a couple of bones, dude. Like, just a few a month could go so fucking far. You guys have no idea. So, it has been a hot fucking minute since I was behind this microphone. I understand that I was basically absent all of July, save for the random things I uploaded on YouTube, and even that petered out after a bit. There is a very fucking good reason for that. Work kicked the shit out of me for a month straight. However, good things are coming. The schedule has been readjusted, and I will be getting 3 days off going forward for the same amount of money. We got some new hires. They're pretty swell people, and I really like them a lot. So I will actually get time off to go back to producing stuff here at Patreon, producing stuff on Fansly, and producing stuff on YouTube. I've missed you, baby. Please tune in. You know I work hard for you, and oh God, I'm such a cheap date. Secondly, the weather was just completely fucking unbearable for basically a month. I don't know how many of you keep up with the summer weather here in North Carolina, but temperatures started at 1, as in 100, and went up from there. Between that and the frequent rainstorms and stuff like that, our weather was literally so bad that it just took the breath out of my lungs for like a month. And so here I am having to do this recording schedule around this very oppressive work schedule I had, plus the heat, straight up from the time that the sun was in the sky until it finally decided to mercifully set around 9 o'clock every night. I basically couldn't record. The soundproof booth in which I record is pretty fucking sweltering, and it's not like we can have proper HVAC or anything like that in here because ambient noise that would detract away from what I was doing. So I basically just didn't have the energy, nor did I have the time to make literally anything for a month straight. That doesn't mean the desire wasn't there, it just means I have not had stable recording conditions for that fucking long. Speaking of stable recording conditions, I do apologize for the ambient sound that is undoubtedly going to get picked up on this recording. I have my window open and we are in the middle of a catastrophic rainstorm brought on by the latest El Nino weather front. So you're going to hear all of the thunder. You're going to hear the frogs fucking directly outside my window. I do apologize, but as I finally had the time and energy to record, I wanted to get this podcast out. So, a few other announcements before we dive headfirst into all of these reviews. You're probably going to notice that we are not going to have trailers in episodes going forward. The reason for that is, straight up, some of these movies just don't have trailers, and I don't want to waste time looking for something that's going to be a fool's errand. Secondly, the sound and mastering on those trailers was not always the best because, let's be honest, these movies are on Tubi, and so often on occasion, I just straight up would have this jarring sound come on during some of these episodes, and that just didn't jive well with a lot of people, and I respect my audience if nothing else. Lastly, I would really like to bring It Came From Tubi to YouTube. Now, YouTube has a very hyperactive copyright system, as many of you are well aware at this point, to the point where even my recent Disco Elysium Let's Play, where I basically get very introspective and talk about what the game means to me, got flagged when we stepped into the whirling rags for the sound effects that were in the game. Obviously, that Let's Play is still up, but it doesn't mean that I didn't have to deal with that. So, sound effects and music and stuff like that are going to be probably pretty minimal. We might have a backing track or something behind this. I haven't quite made up my mind on it yet, but it's all going to be copyright-free going forward because I would like to share this podcast with all of the lovely, fine folks over at YouTube. And hey, if you're one of those people that listens to podcasts about bad movies, I am well aware I am not the only person that reviews shitty movies, so I would love to hear your feedback, regardless of whether you're listening to this on Patreon or somewhere on YouTube or even like one of those, I don't know, music streaming websites, whatever the fuck. I would love to hear from you. Content and good quality stuff only gets pushed forward with audience participation. And hey, I've been doing this for over a decade. I promise I'm not going to bite your head off. I'm not one of these egotistical fucks on YouTube that gets hyper aggressive and what do you mean? I'm not going to do that shit to you. Feel free to leave a comment. Seriously. Lastly, a really cool piece of news. Do you remember the episode I did during Pride where I talked about the Carousel trilogy? Well, apparently, Steve Rudzinski, the director, writer, and head hootenanny in charge over at that production, heard my review and really enjoyed that I loved their film so incredibly much. I was very touched that Steve managed to find my review at all and was so enamored with how much I enjoyed the film. However, Steve did ask me to do something as an independent film creator, and I am going to swear by that. I understand that ads suck, and I hate ads, and I have said several times on this podcast ways that you can get around ads on Tubi so long as you're on desktop. I am not going to do that going forward because Steve very politely asked me to stop mentioning that because every single penny and nickel adds up and allows people like him to continue to produce films. And out of love, both for the Carousel trilogy and respect, since Steve approached me so genuinely and so openly, I'm no longer going to tell you how to do that. There's still several episodes where I tell you explicitly how to do that over on Patreon. That's going to be patreon.com/splathousefic. But going forward, since a director of something I loved personally asked, I'm not doing that anymore. Steve, if you manage to still tune into this show even after I reviewed your movie, my copy of Carousel 4 is in the mail. I just want you to know. Oh yeah! Carousel 4! I can't fucking wait to review that. Yeah, that we will definitely talk about that here on the show. All right, I think that's all relevant announcements that we have. Smoke session, Old Man LaCroix, readings by me, all that shit are going to get back on schedule, probably starting next week. I'm going to try and work hard to schedule things a week out in advance, like I used to. So we're going to have one day that's like safe for work and YouTube shit. We're going to have another day that's not safe for work and auditions. And then the next day is probably going to be commissions and stuff that I can work on then. And, yeah, I think that's it. So let's go ahead and actually start the show in fucking proper with our first film, Man Finds Tape. Man Finds Tape is a documentary-style horror film that takes place in a small town that is dealing with this kind of obtuse and rather evil minister. It is shot very brilliantly, and as the film goes on, it is revealed that there are ties to the occult because, of course, it's a horror movie, and things kind of unfold from there in very called shot kind of directions, if I can be sincere. I first heard about Man Finds Tape, I think it was on B-Sky or even somewhere deep in like horror YouTube, where people were openly talking about it and how it's this giant love letter to analog horror and all that other stuff. And I wish I could say the same. I really do. It's pretty obvious to me, at least, what this film is really trying to talk about, and that is a spiritual leader exerting their power to exploit young children, and you can interpret that however you see fit, because this recording is going up on YouTube. And quite frankly, the imagery and the metaphors that it uses to talk about this and why the town stayed quiet and how this kind of giant open secret just became accepted by the people of the town. It's all competently shot. It's all competently wrote. And then we get to the ending, right? And it's kind of revealed that everything has ties back to this elder god, and it's all kind of vaguely wrapped up in this pseudo-satisfactory way of having this cliffhanger of what happened to this stranger with this bag and this black coat that kind of really looks like Billy Butcher from The Boys. And it does everything by the letter, and that's where I think this film actually suffers the most. Again, competently shot, competently directed. Everybody in the film itself acts pretty well for being a bunch of no-name actors, in my opinion. And even the special effects and stuff are all practical for the most part. So I really genuinely loved that. To my knowledge, during the one sequence that kind of ties back to the Elder God or the Devil or whatever it was, there was no generative AI used. I'm not sure if that was a practical effect, but the fact that they managed to make it both look convincing and suitably horrifying for a finale was great. I love that they pulled that off. There's so much this film did right that I really wish I could sing the praises of more, but I just can't. Man Finds Tape is a very textbook example of a B horror movie that is lifting a lot of inspiration throughout the genre's history, from things like Blair Witch to, I would even argue, The Strain and a couple of analog horror series. And it does all of this just fine, but I simply was not wowed by this film at all whatsoever. The way that everybody else talked about this movie, I was expecting kind of, not necessarily groundbreaking, but at least an intriguing story that unfolds and uses the mediums of these found tapes to tell its story. And I think that's something that a lot of analog horror and stuff like that really suffers from, especially now as it's going mainstream. And inevitably, we're going to start seeing a lot more projects going to that analog horror well, or that dead horse, depending on who you ask, and trying to milk as much as they can out of it. There's a reason you choose the specific visual medium of your story. Let's take something like Kane Pixels' The Backrooms, okay? Almost all of that movie is told through the use of handycams and tapes, or that series, if you'd prefer, with async and all that. And that makes perfect sense because it takes place in the 90s, right? DVDs, file transfers, all this stuff wasn't really widely available during that time period. So, like, let's take the first episode of The Backrooms. It's a bunch of kids fucking around making a student film. The presentation, even when it switches over to the Blender aspects of it, looks rough and kind of gnarly, and it's because you have a magnetic VHS tape that is being affected by the backrooms. The ambiance of the backrooms fucks with the equipment, right? So it looks rough, it looks gross. Compared to Man Finds Tape, where we have these found footage segments along with the people who survived the town getting interviewed, and I can't really tell you when one or the other is being used, save for a couple of instances. And the reason I'm harping on this so much is because if you choose a very specific medium to tell your story with, like VHS tapes, not only does that date your story to a very specific time period in wherever it's being filmed, there also comes the aesthetic responsibility of, well, we're going to have VHS glitches and stuff like that because of evil hoodoo shit going on, right? And that adds to the tension, and I just don't feel like Man Finds Tape makes any use of its aesthetic choice in a sufficient manner. It kind of uses the found footage aspect as a way to tell this just very B-list narrative about demons and shit. And, like, it's fine. It's not bad. It's just not nearly as interesting as I was led to believe. I was told that this was the independent horror movie of 2026, and I was severely let down by that. It is competently shot. And hey, if you're one of those crazy psychotic horror buffs that knows more than me, explain to me why this movie's getting so much praise. I would legitimately love to hear your thoughts. On a scale of 1 to 10, I really fucking hate grading movies. I'd give it like a 6.5. Again, not a terrible film, just not fantastic. Our next film is truly a doozy. It's the Amityville Backrooms. So, you have undoubtedly seen another YouTuber talk about this movie and talk about how shitty it is and how it's like the Temu Backrooms movie, and it is. But there's a very specific reason for that. The rights to the Amityville horror film franchise have basically been in a decades-long dispute with the surviving son of the Amityville incident and a bunch of people that just want to crank out like absolute schlock films because they own the rights. So every so often, we get a new Amityville horror movie, either a big production that makes absolutely $0 because this is a film that's been remade like 10 times, or we get something like the Amityville Backrooms, where it is so obviously done for the budget of the string in my pocket and a ham sandwich to be immediately uploaded onto Tubi and kind of turned into review slop, right? Because if you get enough people talking about your movie that you spent no money on, inevitably that leads to people going to Tubi to watch your film, either high or drunk with their best friends or whatever, and you generate ad revenue off of that. That is literally the entire reason that the Amityville Backrooms exists, not because it's good, but because it is such garbage that inevitably some YouTuber like myself is going to catch wind of it, and we have to talk about it. So, as I finished the Backrooms video that I did, I want to say at the start of July, shortly after I went to go see the movie, I decided, fuck it, let's see if the Amityville Backrooms is really that bad. And the biggest sin that a trash horror movie can have, to me, is being boring. I can take no budget. I've talked about lovingly how much I enjoyed Chris Seaver's films. I can take kind of goofy, like Adobe Photoshop level effects. Again, Carousel and that quadrilogy, I should say now, was fantastic. Genuinely loved those movies. They were such a good time. Neither of these that I just mentioned were boring at any single point. I was completely captivated, if for no other reason than I genuinely had no fucking idea what was going to happen on screen next, and it was very refreshing compared to the paint-by-the-numbers things like Man Finds Tape. Amityville Backrooms is one of the most boring movies I have ever seen in my entire life. And yes, I've even watched that independent film where you literally watch a guy count to, I think it's 1 billion or something. I made it 2 hours and then I ducked out, dude. I wasn't going to finish that. Amityville Backrooms centers around a real estate agent that is trying to move a house. And of course, this is done with almost slapstick levels of acting. You can literally see the actors reading off the cue cards and stuff like that because they refuse to memorize their lines. And this inevitably leads to him getting trapped in whatever fucking Airbnb it is that they rented out for the weekend to shoot this movie. And almost every single scene is our lead actor going around being like, this is crazy. I can't believe I'm trapped. This is crazy. I can't believe I'm trapped, before going to the backyard and seeing a fence that he probably could have, got over, going back inside, looking on his phone at footage, and then walking around again going, this is crazy. I can't believe this. I can't believe I'm trapped. If you asked me to give you a detailed description of the plot of this film with a gun pressed to my temple, I would tell you to tell my cats I loved them. Amityville Backrooms is not something that was made with love, artistic integrity, or purpose. It is something that was made to be a tax write-off for the LLC that holds the rights to the Amityville film franchise. In case you think I'm lying, there's like 14 of these. We have a Thanksgiving-themed one. We have a Christmas-themed one. We have multitudes of ones that are riffing on concepts found in other movies. All of them are basically the same film, and they all suck ass entirely. Normally, when it comes to films like this, I'm like, oh, hey, they're really fun to, watch with your friends getting drunk or high or something like that. This is not one of those cases, and I don't think any of the Amityville movies warrant being watched whatsoever. All you are doing is aiding somebody's money laundering scheme. They suck. Every single one of them is bad. Open money laundering and tax evasion out of 10. If you absolutely have to subject yourself to the Amityville movies, go back and listen to those previous episodes where I tell you how to avoid ads, because I don't believe in giving these fucks any money whatsoever. Our next film is Eddie Glum. Eddie Glum is an incredibly interesting, very low-budget indie horror movie about a guy who can best be described as Sling Blade, but in a horror movie at the end of the world, just trying to survive an invasion from these things called the People that are cannibalistic and only appear at night. It is shot documentary style with a black and white handycam, though there is splashes of color at various points in the movie for very specific reasons. It is told kind of as this, I want to say, view looking back on why these kinds of independent films were so popular and why they gained so much attention, especially over the last decade with the rise of Tubi and people lovingly going back and looking at those 30, 40 movie collection packs that you could pick up for like $20 at Best Buy when that was still a thing. If Amityville Backrooms committed the grievous sin of being boring, Eddie Glum is anything but that. Yes, this is an extremely low-budget film. Yes, you're going to notice those dead bodies on the ground are actually still breathing. And yeah, the costume and makeup department leaves a lot to be desired, but the guy playing Eddie did so with a lot of love as a mentally disturbed person. I feel like Eddie's character was kind of realistically portrayed as a guy that is getting very overstimulated and trying extremely hard to center themselves and remain sane and competent enough to survive the apocalypse. And as the film unfolds, you get no real explanation for why the people happen towards the tail end of it, and the reveal of the big bad evil that happened to be there that was causing this absolute disaster, this almost rapturous-esque kind of setting. All of it is pulled off in such interesting fashion. Things are shot with purpose and passion. This entire horror film is one of those where I'm like, damn, if you only had a couple of people to throw you some stacks, we really could have had something here. Eddie Glum is a weird film. It's like if Eraserhead wanted to be even more horror bent in its execution. And while I think there's a huge segment of you that are probably going to watch this film and laugh, I encourage you to pay attention to it. Yes, there's comedic moments in this film, but the way in which the cinematography specifically works within the confines of the budget makes this not necessarily a harrowing story, but definitely fucking interesting. I put on Eddie Glum basically on a lark because I figured I was going to tune out of it 20 minutes in, and I more or less stayed completely captivated till the very end. The way in which this film ends is on a cliffhanger that offers no real explanations, but it encourages you as the viewer to discuss the film and turn it over and be analytical with it in your head. And that is something that, personally speaking, I didn't get from Man Finds Tape, and obviously I didn't get from Amityville Backrooms. If you pick any movie, aside from the next one I'm going to talk about, out of this bunch to watch, check out Eddie Glum. I think it's only like an hour and 15 minutes long, but it's very stylistic, and it's definitely going to appeal to a niche portion of my audience that likes those weird-ass no-budget horror films. Our final film to round out this episode is going to be 2020's Survival Skills. Survival Skills is a meta-comedy horror movie that takes place around a police chief reviewing a survival tape with you, the viewer, as a prospective new employee at their PD. Our lead character is Jim, who is the platonic ideal of a good cop within the settings of the tape where things occur. Jim has the idyllic life. He's got a wife, he's a cop, he's helping his community, but as the movie goes on, Jim becomes more and more aware of the cracks at the edges of the setting with which he finds himself in, and being the virtuous good cop that he wants to be, tries to push forward and make a difference in his community. This, of course, means that Jim is immediately going off script to take care of a woman he suspects of being battered by her husband. This is along with the police chief who's sitting at the desk. Don't forget that he exists, trust me, or this movie's going to get really weird for you. Even trying to corral Jim back in by rewinding the tape and having him do another take. But Jim presses forward for what he thinks is truth, justice, and the American way, and quickly becomes very disillusioned with just how effective good policing can be in a community. Now, I don't want to spoil anything. This is definitely the sleeper hit of this episode, but Survival Skills, there's so many different takes you can get from this movie. You could say, oh, this is very obviously like ironic propaganda, right? By painting Jim as this virtuous good cop that's trying to do the right thing to the point where he even puts his badge down to make it happen and all of this other stuff. And I don't think that takes wrong. You could also say that it's the opposite, where Survival Skills is showing that policing is ineffective and we should care about our community as people first.
I think that take is also completely correct. You can also just say that this is a weird horror movie, and you're gonna be, again, completely correct with that. Survival Skills has so much dedication to the art form and the aesthetic choices that it makes within there that it feels like you're watching those 90s training tapes right up until Jim becomes self-aware. It's a fantastic movie. I can't believe more people aren't talking about this film. I looked on horror YouTube and Beast Guy and Tumblr and everywhere else, and I just haven't seen any discussion about it. Out of all of the 4 that I've talked about this episode, I'm more surprised that this getting released on Tubi didn't garner more attention than Man Finds Tape. In my personal opinion, it's the superior horror film, and I feel like it's another one of those moments where it's shot with love, passion, and an idea that sounds crazy on paper, but they execute it brilliantly. Survival Skills, if I was to pick any films from this review, is probably at the top of the list. There's going to be links for all of these films down below if you're on Patreon, and hey, if you're on YouTube, just go to Tubi and search it up. You'll find it. You'll probably also find other people talking about these movies, but you know, they're not as handsome as me. They don't have as much swagger, and their dick is not nearly as huge. My shit drags the fucking floor. I tell you what, brother, when I get up in the morning, this has been It Came From Tubi. I am your host, as always, Jack. Hey, if you thought I was funny, or you liked any of the reviews, or this helps you find a cool movie, please consider supporting me on Patreon. Literally, what I make goes into taking care of my cats that I love very, very much. And if you want to talk more about these films, please feel free to leave a comment down below. I'm always approachable and happy to talk movies. Until next time, go watch something!